Begin Self-Publishing episode number 95. Lessons from Social Media Marketing World.
Interested in self-publishing but don't know where to start? Want to get your book onto Amazon? Want to hold your paperback book in your hands? Learn how on the Begin Self-Publishing podcast with your host, Tim Lewis.
Now, due to a late rescheduling of an interview, I'm going to do a very short solo show instead about what I learned from Social Media Marketing World and to some extent from the London Book Fair. It's interesting actually as a contrast because quite a large number of guests from the show were either at Social Media Marketing World or at the London Book Fair. So it's kind of been an opportunity for me to connect with previous guests of the show who I may have only met in the virtual world before or very briefly. I suppose that is my first lesson in terms of what I learnt from this particular social media marketing world. It's the third one I've been to, and this year was so much better in terms of the connections I made. In previous years I made connections with people, but they weren't particularly deep because of the short period of time you're at the conference. But this year I was able to build on relationships that I'd made in previous years. And I got so much more close to a lot of people that I've known for a while, on and off online. And I think that is something that you get if you go to the same kind of events and conferences year after year or month after month. You get to know people very well. And I think it gets paid to the myth that you can't know people well who you've met online. I think at some point you always inevitably need to go and meet people in person. But you can start off by creating a relationship in social media, in the online world, and then gradually build it up until the point where you actually meet them and you feel like you already know them. And that was certainly the case for me at Social Media Marketing World, and to a lesser extent at the London Book Fair. I think missing last year's London Book Fair because I was ill meant that I probably didn't have the same kind of connections with people there because this was only the first time that I met a lot of them in person. So I think there is a lot to be said for using conferences or events where you meet people in person to build on already existing online relationships. In terms of what I actually learned from the sessions at Social Media Marketing World, apart from the fact that I learned that it actually can rain in San Diego, which I wasn't aware of. The weather wasn't wonderful, as it usually is in San Diego. It was actually raining a few of the days. Though compared to what the weather was like in Boston on my way back, it was still quite warm and sunny. In terms of the sessions that I've seen or I watched a virtual replay of, one of the good things about Social Media Marketing World, which some conferences do and some don't, is that you get a free virtual ticket. So any of the many sessions that you didn't see, you can watch a replay of afterwards. Now, I've clearly not had a chance to go through and watch all of the 90 odd sessions. So these lessons that I've learned, some of them are from virtual sessions, which I've seen afterwards. Probably seen about 5 or 6 virtual sessions. And some of them are from sessions I saw at the time there. Now, I may be accused at times of maybe going to too many parties and not going to enough sessions at these conferences. So I'm sure there are lots of great things that I'll discover from the virtual ticket later on. But one of the first things that kind of struck out to me from the sessions I went to was the whole kind of dichotomy between strategies, certainly on Twitter, that people are using. There seems to be a move towards automation on one hand, and there was one session I went to with a singer cum data scientist called Shalita Burke, where she was more or less doing what I would call semi-automated industrial Twitter use. She's got things like thousands of Twitter accounts all connected up with automation and bots, and everything is automated. And it's very easy to say that you shouldn't be automating things like your tweets to go out every 8 minutes. She retweets her own tweets every 8 minutes and has multiple accounts that all do different purposes, all feeding into one big Twitter account. It's almost like the extreme that you hear of, where you see like auto DMs and auto Twitter messages. And I suppose what I appreciate is that it's very easy to say, oh, you shouldn't do all this kind of automated stuff, but it quite clearly works. But on the other hand, if you're doing anything automated, then you're going to be competing against people like her who are spending all their time and evenings looking into all the latest programs and automation techniques for Twitter. So can extreme automation work? Certainly, in terms of building up a Twitter following. And if you can find some course or somebody to sort of take you on that path for a while, then I certainly wouldn't discourage you. However much I hate things like auto DMs and the like, there is a fact that some of this extremely high volume automated approach to social media can work. On the other hand, I also went to a lot of other sessions, including one by some of my British colleagues, a pair, Andrew and Pete. They've got surnames, but everybody knows them as Andrew and Pete. They're a marketing agency from Newcastle in the UK. Their Twitter session was the total opposite. It was all about making interpersonal connections and sending people video messages. And I think that approach works as well. And in some ways, the personalised approach to Twitter, even though it does take a lot more work than setting up a huge amount of automated things that you can just leave, the personal approach to Twitter clearly works as well. I suppose that's, in my mind, it's focused on the fact that there are many different ways to skin the proverbial social media cat. And you don't have to say, don't send auto DMs or don't spend any time interacting with people on Twitter, or whatever ridiculous extreme you want to use. Find and try things until you find something that works for you, and then stick with it. Another lesson that I learned from the conference was, ironically, usually every year the keynote says, and the big thing in social media marketing this year is insert word, and it was either like live video a few years ago, or Snapchat was allegedly the big thing last year, even though it turns out it probably wasn't. But this year there was like, well, there isn't anything clear-cut new, was what we were told in the keynote. But to me, the theme of the new thing was not virtual reality, as people keep saying every year until the next year that virtual reality is going to be the next big thing in marketing. But it's the rise of what's known as bots. Now, these are automated programs that respond to an interaction. And this can be on Twitter or Facebook Messenger or any of these platforms, or even something like Slack. So, for example, I'm going to look at setting up on my Stone and Press account, once I get a few things sorted out, that if you message it, it will reply back to you, looking at the content of your message with some sort of sensible response. I mean, I think there is a bit of over-egging of the pudding as regards to all these bots, in as much as people are claiming that they're like natural language intelligence, all those like robotic humans, when usually all they're doing is looking for particular keywords in something that somebody types and then responding with an appropriate response. However, it's not beyond the realms of our imagination to see that there is vast potential here for both authors and for other people, because you can, in effect, automate a large amount of what would have been normal kind of service conversations. So if somebody messages you on Facebook and says, can you tell me about your books? That is something that could be automated by a bot, seeing that and saying, oh yes, here's a list of all the links to my book. And it means that you can start moving from a very high intensive messaging policy to one where you've got some automated system that can do those interactions on messaging platforms rather than on social media. So I think bots are the next big thing in marketing and social media marketing in general. Are they quite there yet? Who knows? I'm going to experiment. I certainly think the technology is there at the point where you can do useful things with automated bots on, say, your Facebook page or even on Twitter, potentially. Another session that I watched virtually after the event was Larry Kim's. Now, Larry Kim is a guy who was in charge of a huge marketing budget, and he was presenting his tips for how to actually make a success with paid advertising. The funny thing is that his presentation chimes with a trend that I've been seeing in a lot of these interviews. And that trend is that you've got to back winners. The great issue, of course, is that very few of us have any idea which posts or which books are realistically going to do well. We would like to say that we all know that the book we wrote about the zombie apocalypse in the library was going to be the breakout book. But Larry Kim's idea and his ethos is this, he has this concept of unicorns. And he's talking, of course, about blogging or podcasting. But I think there's also a case that you can use the same approach for books as well. So what does he mean by unicorn? Well, the idea is that you're, say, posting on your blog every week. And most of the time, like, one or two people will see it. Maybe you'll get the odd share here and there. And then suddenly, one blog post that you post does really well. It starts to get like hundreds of views, people sharing it all over the place. Those are the unicorns. And as he pointed out, and I've seen this as well, is that some of your content will just do spectacularly well, an order of magnitude better than every other piece of content you've got. And those are the things that you should be putting money behind to advertise and to promote. Too many of us waste time advertising books and blog posts and spending time on promotion for things where there just isn't any interest in the underlying book or blog post. Which comes back to the well often said thing that you should write lots of books. Because sooner or later you're going to come across the unicorn book that is successful. We kind of saw this with Adam Croft in his interview, that he was doing all right with his books, but there was one particular book that took off, and he started putting real money behind that in terms of Facebook ads. So I think the idea that you've got to keep an eye on all your analytics for all of your blog posts, keep an eye on your book sales, obviously, and then look for the successful books or blog posts and then put money behind them. The other concept from his talk that I liked was that he was talking about creating unicorn babies. So once you find this blog post that is doing really well, obviously the first thing you want to do is create extra content on a similar theme. There's little unicorn babies. This is why people make sequels of popular books and films. You find something that works, however on earth you do it, and then you have to put money behind it. And you have to kind of push that concept forward. So those are the kind of major lessons that I learned from social media marketing world this year. I've also managed to recruit quite a few potential guests for the show. So I'm in the process of booking them all up and trying to get them on the show in the next couple of weeks or months even. So I shall talk to you guys next week when we'll be back to the interview format.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, please stop by iTunes and rate and leave a review. This helps make the show more visible. For free resources, show notes, and other helpful content, join the community at beginselfpublishing.com.